Oklahoma loves its veterans. We name roads after them, honor them with special monuments. Politicians praise them as heroes.
To our brave men and women that we are honoring here today, thank you for your dedication. Thank you for your courage. Thank you for your sacrifice that you are making on behalf of freedom.
The legislature honors them every year.
General George S. Patton praised the 45th Division as one of the best, if not the best, division in the history of American arms.
And they approve special laws to give them preference. Oklahoma also operates 7 special centers where veterans, most of them elderly and very ill, can go to live out their final years in a high-quality, long-term care facility just for them. At least that is how the Oklahoma Veterans Centers are advertised. ONR and the Journal Record have found a different story, a story of abuse, death, and abandonment. A system that operates with virtually no oversight, where non-medical personnel can override orders of doctors and family members. A system where veterans live in fear of those who are charged with taking care of them. This is their story. Susan and Michael Kraft are brother and sister. Their father, Alan Kraft, served in World War II. He was part of the unit that freed the survivors of the Dachau concentration camp.
He told us about the skeleton shapes of people who were making their way toward the Americans, wearing just the striped uniforms that we've seen on the newsreels.
After the war, Alan Kraft married and ran successful businesses in Tulsa. But as he grew older, dementia set in, and his children looked for the right place for him to live out his final years. They thought they had found it in the Claremore Veterans Center, a facility that was fully equipped, an in-house pharmacy, laboratory, physical therapy, even a chapel. Alan Kraft went to live in the dementia unit of the Claremore Veterans Center in March of 2011.
We had been looking at the VA facility because it's an all-inclusive facility. They have doctors on staff there full-time, 24 hours.
Alan Kraft entered the Claremore Veterans Center suffering from dementia, but otherwise in relatively good health.
He walked into the facility and the very first day we had lunch with him, he ate completely on his own. He was completely independent, but he did need some supervision. He needed a little help with going to the restroom, finding the restroom.
But within a month, Alan Kraft's condition had changed dramatically.
And in the first month, he lost 10 pounds because he was so heavily medicated that he wasn't eating and he wasn't walking because he was overly medicated.
Alan Kraft could barely communicate. He needed help to eat, and he was unable to control his bodily functions. Michael Kraft is an attorney. Susan Kraft is a medical doctor, with a durable power of attorney that puts her in charge of decisions involving her father's health care. They visited him virtually every day, in part because of their growing concerns over the care he was receiving.
One day I arrived, he was asleep in his chair, he was strapped in his wheelchair, and there was a puddle of urine underneath his wheelchair. The staff claimed that it hadn't been there long, but it shouldn't have been there at all.
And it was apparent to the Kraft children that because of the heavy medication, their father was sleeping through meals and snacks and was becoming increasingly dehydrated.
They had 4-ounce containers of juice, and cranberry on the one hand and apple on the other, and it wasn't unusual in the first 15 or 20 minutes that he would down 30 ounces of fluid.
According to the Krafts, their repeated requests for improved care, less use of psychotropic drugs, more time spent walking instead of in the wheelchair, were not being observed. As the months went by, their father's condition got worse.
And I stayed with him the entire day. He was in his bed, practically catatonic for 8 hours while I sat by his bedside. It was completely unnecessary. The doses were extraordinary, and they were a violation of the chemical restraint policy that they have in place.
Then one evening, Susan Kraft arrived at the Claremore Veterans Center to find her father in this condition.
That's exactly how I found him when I arrived that evening. When I tried to get him, he was asleep. in the chair, strapped in the chair, leaned over.
Slumped over.
When I tried to get him to his room, it was very difficult because he was already asleep. What I found out later was he had been given medication that I had requested that he not be given.
Susan Kraft says staff members would walk right by her father and ignore him. He had apparently been sitting like that for over an hour. And then there was this.
When we found him and his entire side of his face was black and blue and bruised, and we asked the staff what happened, and the story we got was that he was tangled up in his wheelchair because he was strapped to it. He was trying to get out of it. The wheelchair fell over on top of him, and he ended up
He hit his head on
hitting
the
his
floor.
head.
By September, the Crafts say their repeated complaints resulted in a letter from the Claremore Center ordering Alan Kraft involuntarily discharged. The center alleged that Kraft had gotten out of his wheelchair, walked into a patient's room, and bit another patient. No evidence was ever presented to the Crafts to verify the allegation. This is Alan Kraft today. He now lives in a private nursing facility in Tulsa. He's able to walk, feed himself, talk, and occasionally still get a little feisty, something that is very normal for dementia patients.
And in the new facility, in the first month, he gained 5 pounds. In the second month, he gained an additional 5 pounds. He wasn't strapped in a wheelchair. He ambulated everywhere he needed to go in a locked facility, which is exactly what we requested at the Claremore Veterans Center. And today he's doing surprisingly well.
The Crafts have now filed a tort claim alleging their father was given psychotropic drugs as a form of chemical restraint, that the Claremore Veterans Center failed to provide reasonable medical care, causing him physical, mental, and emotional injuries.
But the reason that we're speaking out is not to protect our father. He's fine. It's to be sure that the veterans who are there and the veterans who will be there get the level of care that they deserve.
But Alan Kraft's story is not unique. Joe Carson is an attorney who represented the family of David Shelton, an elderly man who was admitted to the Norman Veterans Center in December of 2006. He died on January 5th of 2007, 16 days after entering the facility. During that 16 days, David Shelton lost 37 pounds. His cause of death is listed as congestive heart failure and acute renal failure due to dehydration.
When they go into this facility, they're supposed to do an assessment. I can't remember the exact time frame, but it was pretty soon upon admission. They failed to do that.
Carson says without that assessment, a series of mistakes followed that made David Shelton's condition worse.
Assessments to do is to establish a baseline, make sure that there are no issues with medication, or one of the things they need to do is talk to the family and find out what other issues they need to put in the chart so that the medical facility, the nurses, the RNs, the nurse assistants can look at the chart and know how to properly treat a patient.
Mr. Shelton's family filed a lawsuit against the Oklahoma Department of Veterans Affairs. According to testimony at trial, the staff at the Norman facility failed to follow doctors' orders on how often to weigh Mr. Shelton, how much fluid he was to receive each day, and failed to notice he was losing a lot of weight.
And you can't tell me that you can't look at this person over 16 days and see that he's losing almost 40 pounds. That's just, I don't accept that explanation.
And then came the mistakes with his medicine. Joe Carson says because there was no initial health care assessment, the center increased dosages of medicine that aggravated the dehydration.
The family and his family practitioner had started weaning him off of Lasix, and they were giving him half doses or on an as-needed basis. And what happened is when he went in there, instead of having the assessment to identify that these are the things going on, they simply started giving him the full dose. I can't remember, I think it was twice daily. And he didn't need that, and it dehydrated him.
At trial, the state argued they did everything they were supposed to for Mr. Shelton.
They tried to say that because that they did the things that the doctors ordered them to do, but they just didn't put it in the chart. But as all first-year medical students, as all first-year nursing students know, if it's not in the chart, you didn't do it.
The judge hearing the case ruled in favor of Mr. Shelton's family and awarded the maximum amount possible under the Governmental Tort Claims Act. The judge in the final ruling said greater damages were warranted, but the law limited the value of the veteran's life to $175,000.
If this would have been a private nursing home, this case would have been worth a lot of money, just because of the egregious nature, and it's just unfathomable. You know, it makes my stomach churn to see how someone of pretty good health come in there and in 16 days wither up and die.
The Tort Claims Act also prohibits punitive damages.
The value of a human life, in my opinion, is in far excess of $175,000. I don't care how old you are.
In 2001, Harold Nishwander's sister filed a lawsuit against the Claremore Veterans Center, alleging that abuse left the 46-year-old comatose man with a broken right femur. The medical reports show that Veterans Center staffers discovered Mr. Nishwander vomiting fecal matter and decided he should go to the hospital. Once there, doctors discovered that Nishwander's bowels had become paralyzed, and his feeding tube, which works around the clock, had been left in despite the fact he was having no bowel movements. In addition, his lungs were inflamed, he had antibiotic-resistant strep throat, and was covered in a rash from head to foot. In 2005, the state settled the case for $10,001. Roger Butts was a Vietnam-era veteran. He suffered from seizures and hepatitis C. His sister is Beverly Channel. She says Roger Butts' health declined to the point he could no longer work, and the Veterans Center in Norman seemed like a good place for him to live.
And he started helping all the other fellas that were there that couldn't get around on their own very well. They were in a wheelchair or bedfast, and he would go in and talk to them. And there was a guy that was talking about things that he was having problems with, and Roger took it upon himself to talk to the head man there and ask him, why isn't this getting done for him? Well, that's none of your business, is what they would tell him.
Beverly says her brother's natural desire to help others occupied his time while in the Norman facility, and his health began to improve.
Anyway, things were going fine as far as seizures. He wasn't having those anymore because they saw to it that he was getting his medication, which, I guess the seizures had caused some memory problems. So when he was out, he had more seizures because he would forget. He thought he took his medication and he hadn't taken it, so then he would have a seizure.
Beverly Channel says eventually, however, Butts' persistence in seeking help for other veterans got him into a shouting match with the center's administrator.
What was it that ended up with Roger being forced to leave the facility? What caused that to happen?
Anyway, he never touched him or anything. There was witnesses there that said Roger had never touched the man, but the man was yelling at Roger also, and Roger just said, well, you don't have no business, keeping them from getting what they need.
And what Roger Butts was asking for amounted to basic needs.
Because Roger had told them that one man laid in his own feces for 2 hours or more because they wouldn't go in and take care of him. And you would think that, especially in a VA center, that's what they would want to do, is take care of the men that were in the service protecting people. So it was ugly. It was really ugly.
Roger Butts was involuntarily discharged from the Norman Veterans Center. The facility said his health had improved to the point he no longer needed to be there. Because his sister lived in Tecumseh, that is where Roger ended up, eventually living in the Range Motel, paying a monthly fee. 2 months after Roger Butts was discharged, he was found dead in his motel room.
And what happened to him? How did he die?
So I knew it was because, he wasn't getting his medication, and how can he be healthy if he's still got that problem?
The medical examiner concluded Roger Butts suffocated as a result of a seizure.
And that's why I wanted to do whatever I could do, for him, because I wasn't able to while he was alive. But it's a shame I have to, go after he died. But I want it to be known that was the reason he died. And hope and pray those other men and women that are in there get better care.
And then there is John Doc Rollins. He was a World War II veteran and longtime Purcell doctor. His widow, Arvita Rollins, is suing the Norman Veterans Center and the Oklahoma Department of Veterans Affairs, claiming her husband died due to medical negligence. Because of the pending litigation, neither Mrs. Rollins nor her attorneys would agree to an interview for this story. But before the suit was filed, Arvita Rollins talked to Scott Carter of the Journal-Record.
And for 8 years, he lived at the Norman Veterans Center with no problem. He was on one particular ward and apparently saw his wife. She went there every day.
After 8 years in the same ward, John Rollins' Alzheimer's worsened to the point the center decided to move him to a different unit. Rollins' widow told Scott Carter after the move, issues with his care began. Rollins' medical records contain several references to proper procedures for moving him out of bed. Carter says Arvita Rollins believes that moving process is what caused the injuries that claimed her husband's life.
That's what she blames for her husband's death, is the fact that staff attempted to move him at some point and actually dropped him.
For now, just what happened to Dr. John Rollins and whether the Norman Veterans Center caused his death remains an issue to be decided in court. The U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs' most recent audit of the Claremore Veterans Center showed numerous problems which required a written plan to remedy. Issues included inadequate staff training for advanced cardiac life support, a medical director who failed to take part in staff meetings, and failure to report abuse. In Ardmore last year, a staff member of that Veterans Center, 47-year-old Donald Demonbrun, was arrested on rape charges. The case was uncovered only after the local police department received an anonymous letter saying reports had been made to Veterans Center officials alleging that Demonbrun engaged in improper sex acts with a patient. When investigators began looking, they found a second alleged victim and discovered the incidents had been reported to the center's director, who had allowed Demonbrun to continue working in the facility and never reported the matter to police or state officials. The rape investigation also discovered that 2 certified nursing assistants and a nurse had also been fired for alleged abuse. Neither the rape nor the dismissals showed up in the Ardmore facility's 2011 federal audit, which gives the center a clean bill of health. The district attorney in Ardmore decided against pursuing the rape charges and refiled 4 abuse charges against Demonbrun. He was bound over for trial in June of last year. However, all 4 victims died shortly thereafter. The DA dropped all the charges, and records of the case no longer exist. It was expunged. Esther Hauser is the long-term care ombudsman with the Aging Services Department for the Department of Human Services. She believes others at the Ardmore Veterans Center should have faced charges.
Well, the administrator should have been prosecuted for failure to report abuse. And they can report to local law enforcement, or they can report to Adult Protective Services. There's a toll-free hotline, statewide hotline, that the administrator, as part of his role and his licensing as an administrator, should have done, should have known to do.
Also last year, a staff member of the Norman Veterans Center was arrested and charged with 3 counts of rape and oral sodomy against 2 of the patients. Jeremy Craig Leday waived his right to a preliminary hearing and has pled not guilty. That case is still pending. The yearly audit for 2011 by the Federal Veterans Administration makes no mention of the rape case and gave the facility full certification. Dr. Pamela Haitai was the medical director at the Norman Veterans Center from April of 2006 through December of 2010. She now lives in Oregon. Dr. Haitai says she resigned her position after repeatedly attempting to fix numerous problems at the Norman facility and even took the step of turning her own center into DHS for neglect.
It took probably 5 phone calls to finally get to someone that even wanted to take my information. And they were absolutely amazed that a physician was calling about their own facility reporting neglect.
Dr. Haitai says DHS never interviewed her concerning her complaint of neglect. Before she reported the issues to DHS, she went to the legal division of the Oklahoma Department of Veterans Affairs.
I called legal and said, we've got some problems over here. I think lack of care and the neglect has resulted in 3 veterans' deaths at this facility. And Martha Spear came over and huddled in the office with Christy Howe, but never came over and talked to me about it. So, it went all the way to the top as far as I'm concerned.
Christy Howell is the administrator of the Norman Veterans Center. Martha Spear is the executive director of the Oklahoma Department of Veterans Affairs. Administrators at the facilities referred us to Martha Spear for comments. We asked Spear for an interview, but she declined. Spear did release this statement that references the department's expansion and renovation projects and says all 7 centers have full federal certification, but it does not address the issues raised in this report. According to the Department of Human Services Adult Protection Division, from April 2010 through April 2012, the agency received 79 complaints from veteran centers. 8 abuse cases were substantiated, 25 others were not. Total neglect complaints substantiated, 12. 23 were not. Total sexual abuse cases substantiated, 1. 2 were not. Total verbal abuse cases confirmed, 3. 3 others were not. 2 exploitation cases were also confirmed. We also asked the state medical examiner's office for all autopsy reports of any patients who died at the veterans centers over the last 3 years. They reported only 1 case, but that involved a patient from a VA hospital. Despite the state reporting requirements, the only oversight of Oklahoma's 7 veterans' homes rests with the private company that conducts the yearly audits for the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs. Dr. Pamela Haitai says those inspections amount to friendly visits and a chance to clean up the facility.
Everybody knows when they're coming. So everybody is called into work and nobody can take off. And we're going to put our best foot forward. And they work for weeks on end prior to inspection to get the facilities ready. I know. I was part of it. And, yeah, at that particular moment, everything looks great. The residents look great. And, yeah, they pass. And then everything goes back to the way it used to be prior to inspection.
Retired Major General Rita Aragon is Secretary of Veterans Affairs and a member of the governor's cabinet. General Aragon says she discovered early that her new job did not extend to oversight of the Oklahoma Department of Veterans Affairs or those charged with oversight of the centers, the War Veterans Commission.
When I ask about information on it, I am told literally with a hand in my face, we do not work for you. You are just the governor's liaison. The director and the chairman of the War Commission said, you understand that we're the people that are charged with the responsibility for doing that.
General Aragon says she decided to go elsewhere for some answers.
I've requested audits not only of the finances, I've requested care audit.
The requests were made to State Auditor and Inspector Gary Jones a year ago.
The first one is called just a compliance audit. I believe this one is called a fact-finding audit.
And this is through Gary Jones's office?
Yes. And he actually brought in outside people to look at it.
Now, is that still going on?
To the best of my knowledge, I've not been given any report that it's been finished.
And the governor has plans of her own. Governor Fallin sought a restructuring of the War Veterans Commission, but opposition in the legislature has stopped that from happening. Nonetheless, there will soon be new faces on the War Veterans Commission.
Governor Fallin is now in the process of selecting 9 new positions, but they're limited to the 3 big organizations, the American Legion, the VFW, and the Disabled American Veterans. From that, by law, the governor must select from a list of 10 people that they give her. General
Aragon says reports on the veteran centers from the Oklahoma Department of Veterans Affairs paint a picture of facilities that are among the best in the nation.
1,482 beds that we have. The VA says are the finest in the nation. And that's the report that I'm given, that's the report that the governor is given.
But she knows firsthand there are problems, especially with a staff turnover rate that is very high.
The state has had a hiring freeze on for a long time, so I have to sign the form that says, yes, this is a critical position. The cabinet secretary, that's their oversight is to make sure that we see all of them. There is a high turnover rate.
Dr. Pamela Haitai says that turnover rate goes back many years. She saw it when she went to work as the medical director of the Norman Veterans Center.
My experience was good RNs didn't stay long because of the way they were treated. The assistant director of nursing has 2 sets of rules. One set of rules for the cute girls in the facility, he's a guy, and another set of rules for anybody else that he doesn't like. And when you try to manage a facility of that size with that type of mentality, you're going to lose your good nurses. You're going to lose your good aides. Nobody wants to stay there.
There now appears to be a growing consensus that the decision to exempt the state's veterans centers from state health department inspections back in 2003 was a bad idea.
Anytime we audit ourselves, that's why we have an audit agency. Anytime we investigate ourselves, that's why we have the OSBI. We have a tendency to make exceptions for, when I say we, I'm talking the global we. We have a tendency to try to explain it away. That's why outside look in is so critical. That's why it's so important.
I hoped that the verdict against them in the Shelton case would have changed their practices, but it sounds like it maybe didn't.
You know, it's all well and good to say we have 1,400 patients, but, you know, I got to tell you, there's an awful lot of them that are dying sooner than they should, and it's because they're in our facilities.
ONR's Bob Sands produced this report in collaboration with M. Scott Carter of the Journal Record. Bob, as part of this story, you made numerous requests for additional information through the Freedom of Information Act. What additional information have you been able to uncover?
Well, we just got this in from the State Health Department, and we asked them to tell us. One of the requirements is that whenever there's an alleged abuse case of any sort, it has to be reported to the State Health Department, a special division there. 42 inquiries involving alleged caretaker abuse or neglect or misappropriation from the various centers from September of last year till April of this year. 42 of those were received. 22 have been investigated. They said they could not substantiate them. And I need to explain that, as well as in this story that you saw. When they can't substantiate it, doesn't mean it didn't happen. It just means they couldn't substantiate it. And in these instances, that's not unusual. A lot of these guys can't even talk.
Well, some people die after the report's been filed.
Yes.
These guys are really frail, and so often you can't go back to that victim and talk to them.
And they did tell us that of the 20 that are remaining, they're in the process. They're being investigated now.
Scott, Governor Fallin is fully aware of the details in this report and also in your story. What's her reaction?
Governor Fallin said this was terrible. She said it could not go on. It needed to be fixed. She told us she's in the process. She's named 4 new members. She sent those names to the Senate for confirmation of the War Veterans Commission, the commission charged with oversight not only of the Department of Veterans Affairs and the centers, but they also hire the executive director of the Department of Veterans Affairs. She's submitted 4 new names and is in the process of vetting the rest. If that's the case and she can appoint a complete new commission, she may have some people that she can push to make changes and improve things.
And she did make clear that there was a very serious vetting process this time around.
What did she say when she heard these details?
Well, I think it's a fair statement to say she was horrified. Scott?
Yeah, I believe she used that term. She used the same term her cabinet secretary did. She said this is appalling, it can't continue, and she wanted it fixed.
You reported on several cases, but there indeed are 1,400 patients who are in these various centers. So how widespread is this problem?
Well, I got the distinct feeling in looking at this, and I think Scott did as well, that it's very difficult to pull out all of the cases. We examined thousands of pages of documents. I think it's a fair bet to say, with the kind of information we just got in from the Health Department, the kind of information we've gotten in from the Department of Human Services, that this is very widespread across all 7 of them.
Pam Haitai, the doctor, she says that. She says it's systemic. And she says one of the reasons is that the administrators at the centers are making medical decisions. The nursing staff is under the administrator, not under the medical director. And we saw in this case in Claremore with Alan Kraft, where the administrator was overruling decisions and making changes that way. If that's the case in most of the centers, then it's probably spread throughout the state.
We have just 30 seconds. How does the care veterans receive in these facilities compare to other long-term care facilities and the problems that they have?
Well, I think it's a fair statement to say, since these centers are not inspected by the State Health Department, the other facilities are probably better, because the State Health Department has a very rigorous inspection system. They have an entire list of things they can, discipline steps they can take that are sometimes a little minor, all the way up to taking away a license. That is not possible at the moment with the Veteran Centers.
Bob Sands, Scott Carter, thanks for that report.